Well, greetings to all hams all over the world. Come in tonight. This is the last live stream prior to Field Day, which is coming up very, very quickly. Field Day will be, let's see, 26th and 27th. Starts at noon Mountain Time and ends at noon Mountain Time on the 27th. So it's a 24-hour event. And it's a good thing I looked at the clock because I told them they could borrow a cable switch of mine. And also, I have to get the logging software put on the two computers for that. I had some dental work done yesterday. That was so much fun. Two teeth pulled in preparatory to putting in some partial upper dentures, but it makes me sound funny, I think. So, welcome to everybody. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with our Thursday live stream on the 24th of June, and in 2021. My time flies. Trying to think when the first field day was that I attended. I think it was right after I got out of the Air Force and I went to work for Northrop. So that would have been in 1980. And at that first one, I got there after dinner and left before breakfast. So I didn't get any food. So the next year, I volunteered to do the food. And we had food. The food tent was the first one up and the last one down. So there was food for the whole 24 hours for anybody who wanted it. Sandwich fixings, whatever they wanted. We had a lot of food for that. And that worked out really well. So I hope you are preparing for a field day experience. You can go onto the ARRL website and look for field day locations and just drop by one. Just tell them you're a ham dropping by to see what field day is all about. And don't be surprised if you're offered a chance to operate. If you've never been on HF before, you can use the so-called GOTA station. The GOTA station means get on the air, and it is designed for people who've never been on HF. There is a station there already set up, and there will be a coach right there with you. So that's a pretty cool thing that you can look forward to. Somebody can talk you through, be right there with you as you do the getting on the air. HF is very different from FM. Let's see, Russell says he loves his 7300. Harry Arundel says, hello, Dave, from AC3EK. Optical Man Jeff says, hello, all Augie. If anyone has a power supply for Harvey Wells Bandmaster, that is a high voltage power supply, and I think you're going to end up having to build one. You can get the parts these days to do that. You can do them either with the solid state diodes or one of the old tube type rectifiers, like a 5Y3 or something like that. And Harry also says, congratulations on your new selection in the July QST. I have taken over the column that used to be called The Doctor Is In. It's now called Ask Dave, unsurprisingly. And they actually wanted the tie-in with the channel. They're not taking over the whole channel. No, my channel. But they're using my branding for the channel itself. I will be doing, and we're still getting the kinks ironed out on this. Along with each column, there will be a supplemental video on the digital issue of QST that takes one of the questions and takes it a little bit further. So in the meantime, I'm also trying to get my daily videos up. As it turns out, my assistant is on vacation this week. So between the dental work, the vacation, all of these kinds of things like that, we don't have daily videos the last couple of days. Please forgive me for that. We will have those back, hopefully Monday, when my assistant column not the column in the UK, but the column here in Colorado, comes back from his vacation, and we can get those going again. I've got a stack of stuff I've been working on. Frankly, I've lost track of which files go with which, so I'm waiting for him to get back so that we can start doing that. I've been dealing with a couple medical problems. I went down to the doctor today and said, this looks like it's really weird. I don't know what it is. And he looked at that and he says, there's nothing wrong with that. However, there's something on the back of your hand right there. I'm going to zap it right now. So, ouch! I didn't like that. But we're going to be fine. Let's see. Hello from Far West. That's Glenn Martin. Roy is W4TMY from Virginia. And Jackster0729 says he got his call sign today. KC3SIN. Great. And I'm sure he is looking forward to Saturday because he's going to field day. And let's see. William Myers says hit the like button. I would like that too. We love you, Dave. If we flew out, would you say hi to us? Let's see. Pete Dayton's channel. You got a channel. I do come on other people's channels from time to time if you want. Okay, great. Top at 20K AGL. All right. Yeah, well, it's been wet all day. We got finally a good soaking rain. My rain gauge here says 1/3 of an inch. And I think there were other places in further into town that may have gotten more because I was in town and got caught in the rain a little bit. We'll take all we can get right now. I know it's a shame. The farmers are doing their first cutting of hay, and they like it to be dry when they do that because that hay has to be dry before they roll it up. And the gigantic rolls of hay, the things are huge. Okay, what is the RRL recommended window logging software for field day? There is none. The 2M1MN, is it? Or N1MM? NM is a very popular logging program. The one I use and the one our club uses is N3FJP. Now, the thing about the N3FJP software is that it is specifically designed for the contest at hand. And all of his programs interoperate, and including putting the information up on Logbook of the World. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be updating the computers with this year's software. The software is actually set up. Let me see if I can show you here. We'll go to screen, and we'll go to N3FJP, and we'll look at his field day log right here. This is the field day log. Notice that there's a place here for the call, the class that they give, and the section that they give, and then it will tell you down here, it will warn you if it's a duplicate. And it won't record it if it's a duplicate, even if you do enter it. But all you do is put in the call, the class, the section, and hit enter. And it will keep track of which sections you've gotten and your current points and all that sort of stuff. And it also will prepare the entry that you have to give when you are done with the contest on Sunday. And it's my job. That's my job, is to get that entry sent in. You've got a month, I think, to do it and get that thing in. Okay, Alberto Gavasa says, hello, Mr. OG. Many thanks for your videos from HK7 It's Hotel Kilo 7 Bravo Echo India. I missed the daily vids. Yeah, I know. It's my fault, and I'm sorry. I'm just running into some personal issues. We should have those back this coming week, okay? And get those every yet. Jason has said he's not a ham yet, but he's been watching me for months now and getting my feet wet with SDR and HF. I learned so much. Good for you. Well, take the plunge and take your tech test. Michigan is checking in. Victor Alpha 3, WWE, I think that's Canada. Sounds like the OG organization is too busy right now. He didn't have to approve my assistant's vacation. I didn't have a choice. He and his family left. He's only 17, so, he's going to go with his family wherever that might be. Christopher has put $4 and there's $5 into the chat revenue, which goes into channel funds, which helps me do things like pay for equipment for the channel, like the O-scope and the Spectrum scope and things that I've got. Also helps me pay for flying lessons. I'll talk to you about flying lessons. I'm beginning to wonder if that's going to work. I have over 100 hours and I still haven't soloed. And I'm thinking to myself, at what point do you say I should stick with ham radio? I don't know. I mean, there's no board you go before and they say you can't go any further. It's not like the Air Force where you can get tossed out of flight school or something like that. As long as I want to learn, they'll teach me. My upgrade to Extra took 17 days to get into the FCC database. Yeah, I know. Let's see, any field tips on field day in the rain? Be careful. When you're putting in stakes and things like that, if you put them in the mud, they're not as strong. So be careful with that. Also be careful of lightning. If you're putting up a big mast or something, make sure that there's no lightning in the area. If there's the slightest hint of lightning, delay doing that. I'm in Seattle and our heat dome is hitting this weekend. Record high temps of 108 for 2 days. That is incredibly warm for Seattle. Seattle just doesn't get that warm. N1MM. Okay, that's the logging software that some people use. Some people, logging software is one of those things that people are passionate about. Their logging software is superior to everybody else's logging software. So anyway, I use N3FJP. They also have an all-contact log for general purpose work. They have special logs for like running nets. They have logs for all the different contests that you can use that will put out just exactly the right format. Now, N1MM does that too. So, does a G5RV have to be put in a certain direction if I want to contact Hawaii from Indiana? Well, you can try putting it north-south, but see what you get. They're not terribly directional. Love my unfed half-wave 130 from 05. 43-foot vertical is awesome too. Okay. Using N3FJP. Rainy Seattle, I thought it was Arizona only weather. Yeah. The whole West Coast is getting desiccated because of that. See, Christopher's put in another $5. Felipe Lewis has put in $50. Appreciate your videos. Thank you. What is the oldest radio you have ever seen? Oh, well, I've actually been in the league headquarters where they have Hiram Percy Maxim's old Spark station. So that's the oldest radio I've seen. Sam Miller has a couple RTL SDR V3 dongles. Looking at an SDR Play Duo. Use a Hammond up converter to get HF. Okay, you won't need to do that on the SDR Play Duo. The SDR Play Duo gets HF natively. Let's see. What does Whisper tell you? Okay, Whisper, you can use it for antenna performance experiments. The actual major use for it, the reason it exists, is propagation studies, because you get point-to-point from all over the world, not as evenly spread as they would like, but from all over the world. And they can look at propagation studies. They can compare actual propagation to what the models say and everything, and help improve the models. For us, you can use it for that, although I will tell you, I've got this. This is a printout from Whisper. The ones in yellow are from that crazy isotron antenna. And I look at these very, very carefully, the ones that are isotron, the ones that are my vertical, and I'm having trouble finding a difference between them. And I still haven't had a chance to really sit down and study that and find out what's going on. So I'm going to do a few more tests on that. Nebraska, my wife was born in Nebraska, in Stratton. And TD enjoys the videos. Hang in there, Dave, on soloing. I haven't yet. That's the thing that discourages me. I've got over 100 hours, and I haven't soloed. And after soloing, there are other things I got to learn, like cross-country planning and so on. And I don't know. I have to pay insurance for this coming month. The airplane cost me about $40,000, and they want me to pay $5,000 in insurance. I'm going, good grief. So that's where I'm wondering, do I really want to keep spending this much money and time on something where I'm not making any progress? I think I'm getting better. I think I'm ready to solo, but what I think doesn't matter. It's what my instructor thinks. Can you use DMR and field day to collect points? Yes, absolutely. However, you can't use anything through a repeater to collect points for field day, with one exception, and that is a satellite. You can use a satellite as a repeater and collect points for satellite. But DMR through a repeater to some ham in Tanzania, no. You can't do that. However, direct, simplex, DMR, yes, you can use that for field day. Howdy, Dave, K955 out here in the diesel wagon. Johnson Creek, Wisconsin. I dedicate one to ADSB decoding. Yes, ADSB is a FAA term. Every aircraft has, it used to be every aircraft had a transponder. They've updated that to every aircraft has an ADSB beacon. And it has a lot of information about the beacon, or the aircraft, including speed, altitude, and so on. And it is sent out, and you can actually receive it. I've got a little antenna right over here. It's a coaxial vertical that I made from a piece of LMR 400. And I'm able to use that with my little SDR Play radio. It's the RSP-1A. And it will display it on a map and everything. Now, where we live, we don't see a lot of airplanes. If we were like in Denver, we'd see all the airplanes running around Denver. Aren't so many here. I'm running off an off-center fed dipole on 12-meter band. I've heard that being near salt water, high ground conductivity helps out verticals. Does it help dipoles? Yes, it does. A dipole works with the ground just like a vertical does. A vertical sends out a vertically polarized wave which bounces off the ground and constructively interferes with, I know that sounds weird, constructive interference, but it's a thing, believe me. Works with that to get the actual direction the signal will go. Dipole works the same way. signals go off horizontally. They hit the earth. They bounce. Well, refracted. They come up, and then they, quote, interfere with or interact with the other waves to determine the direction that the signal will go. Okay? So the ground reflection is very much part of a dipole, just like it is for a vertical. However, normally we do not try to increase the ground conductivity of the dipole, but if you were to string it over salt water, certainly that would have an impact. The ideal height, which will get you the most radiation at the lowest level, is half wave. If you go above that, you start getting a bifurcation. Yes, you get a lower lobe, but then you get this big upper lobe coming down on top of it. And I've done some videos about it. It's kind of fun. Is that a bowling ball antenna in the background? You mean, let's see, where is it? We've got to get up to there. That's actually in the foreground in the pictures. That's my logo, and this right here is just a lamp. Didn't know I was a student pilot. Oh, I've been a student pilot for a year. Actually, more than that. I started in February. There have been all sorts of interruptions. I'm on my 4th flight instructor, just due to circumstances. And she says, don't give up, but she doesn't give me any specifics. She doesn't say, we'll solo as soon as you do this. So $5,000 is a lot of radio money, Dave. Yes, it is. I know. There are radios that cost more than that. I'm trying to think what the ICOM 4610 costs. And then there are the flex radios, which are very much up in that price range. The ICOM it's a 7610, not 4610, 7610. There's also another ICOM, or a Kenwood radio, that's up above that price limit. You can pay $10,000 for a radio if you want. Can you still demo a spark gap transmitter? For a moment. I wouldn't do it very often. Let's see. DX Commander Classic arrived in the mail today, hoping to assemble for field day. Well, good. Good luck. I want to warn you on the DX Commander, you need to watch the videos on how to put that thing together. The written instructions on the DX Commander, I will say from having examined them myself, are inadequate. You've got to watch the videos that show how you put that thing on. And there are videos on Callum's website, the other Callum in the UK. Do military planes from Accord use ADSB? I don't know what the military adoption rate is with that, but in order to coordinate with the FAA, they would probably have to. They will have a switch in there somewhere where they can turn it off, because you don't want a tracking beacon on an aircraft that's going into battle. Okay, also feed to ADSB exchange. Good. Once you solo, what would be your favorite lunch or deli sandwich to celebrate? Probably Moab. I'd go over to Moab and eat something there. He's talking about the so-called $100 hamburger, where you and a friend fly to some place a couple hours away and have a hamburger and then fly back. And it doesn't matter what the hamburger costs, you're going to pay at least $100 for the flight. But if you're looking for my favorite deli sandwich, it'd be Philly cheesesteak. Let's see, Optical Man Jeff. There are museums who can demo spark gap, but they're certainly not connected to an antenna. And there are YouTube videos. Let's see, nothing wrong with taking your time as CFI in Arizona. KC5ICY. Um, it is taking my time. I'm trying to fly 3 times a week. Trying to. The Icon 7851 costs $12,000. There you go. Now, you can buy a cheap aircraft for that, although it would cost you more than that to maintain it. They don't use ADSB from my experience. I just have the transponder, but don't relay location. Okay. Dial Spin TV, Code Radio and Tech. I did flight school for sport pilot, but I had to travel 2 hours away. Too many bouts of awful weather, and they didn't want to break the Cessna 162. I'd rather go back and do private pilot. Private pilot will give you more. I'm not doing private because I would never pass the medical. I'm old and gray and all that. And you don't have to pass an FAA medical to get your sport pilot license. You just need a driver's license. In other words, what they're saying is if you're okay with your state for driving, then you're okay for sport pilot. Now, you mentioned the Cessna 162. I was looking at buying one of those, and when I stopped looking and bought the RANs instead, a lot of people in my EAA chapter says, well, that's good, boy. They were hoping I wouldn't buy it. The Cessna 162's got a long and sad history. There were only 60 some odd of them made. So if you've got one, you've got a rare item. In good shape, they sell for around 60 grand. Let's see. Hi, Josh. Ham Radio Crash Course. Okay. Oh, there he is. Hi. Hi, Josh. How are you? Tell me the secret to get to, let's see. Let me do this here. I'm going to go studio. I'm at 94,485 subscribers. So I'm looking at 50, well, whatever. Not too many more to get to 100,000. Okay. And I know Josh has been there. He's gotten there. Spent about $4K from my Elecraft K3 with the 100-watt amp and other bells and whistles. Yeah, the K3 is an interesting, or KX3, which is a QRP radio, is an interesting radio. It is sold in modules, and you can put all the modules together and add things and so on that you want in there. It's the same with the K3 and the K4. K4 is their new one. You can build them in a variety of ways, like add a second receiver and so on. The Elecraft radios are considered by DXers and contesters to be the best radio for a lot of them. Now, a lot go with Flex. I know Brad Rich N6GR goes with Flex. The Elecraft have a very, very quiet VFO, meaning that there's very few spurious emissions out of their VFO. And that makes them quiet. And you can hear the really, really, really weak signals on it. And if someone is near you who does not have a quiet VFO, they've got things that they do to kind of make that better. You go on DXpeditions and they'll take K3s. The K4s aren't really out yet so much, but K3s, because of that very quiet VFO, you can actually put one on CW and one on sideband on the same band at the same time and operate successfully. Here is Don, who spent $5 grand on his Flex radio and separate Maestro. The Maestro is a control unit that actually looks like a radio. If you look up here, oops, that doesn't come up. Oops, sorry, I guess I won't show you. Up there is my Tentec Jupiter which was the Ten-Tech. They had a Ten-Tech, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was a radio that you had to have a computer to interface with. And they built an interface, a standalone interface for it on the same radio. And Flex has done this now with the Maestro. You've got a standard radio-like interface to your radio rather than just using the computer for this. The shores of Lake Champlain in Vermont. In a thunderstorm there at N0QFT's place. We didn't have any lightning today that I know of, but boy, we sure had rain. The little weather station down here has a bit of a humorous side. Says when it gets raining pretty hard, it says it's raining cats and dogs. So, what can be done about the guy impersonating you? Is there somebody? I mean, is he using my name? Or using my content? I don't know. Give me a channel link or something, and I'll take a look at it. Josh says he'll email about it. Okay, thank you. Does that radio that costs $12,000 cook and clean and wash? Yeah, but it doesn't put the dishes away. It just cooks and cleans and washes. I don't, like I said, you can pay anything you want for radio. Now, if you're going to go into commercial radio, these 12,000 radios barely get you started. I mean, the ones the government uses are far, far more expensive than that. And you can pay a lot. Here's the Hilbering radio, 18 grand. It's like in the Olympics. In terms of a race, like the 100-yard dash, the difference between winning and second place, otherwise known as the first loser, is a tenth of a second, sometimes a hundredth of a second. And the person who comes in last may still be less than a second behind. Now, that much improvement to get you from second place to first place seems like a mile-wide gap, because the closer you get to perfection, the higher the cost. Okay? And you can take a radio like an FT450 and have just as much fun on HF. But it probably won't break every pile up. Probably won't break very many of the pile-ups. The people who are paying all that money for those radios are the people who are looking for that last fraction of a second that gets them to first place instead of second place. Now, is that what you want to do? Do you care? Some people do care. There are DXers who are in, they'll smile at each other at the Hamfest, but they're in life and death competition with each other to get the last one. The most wanted DX country for DXCC, which is the award for getting 100 countries. The most wanted country is North Korea. There have been, from time to time, stories saying that North Korea is going to be on the air, and then it always fizzles out. Never happens. I think if the propaganda people in Pyongyang really knew what they were doing, they would officially sponsor an amateur radio station and then give out as many cards as they could. The Russians did that. The Russians during the Cold War, as many of you will remember, P.O. Box 88 in Moscow, which is where you sent all your QSLs for all the Iron Curtain countries, and that's where you got your return QSL from, was Box 88. And they viewed, first of all, rather differently than we do, they viewed radio, a sport, in the same sense as golf or football. They would sponsor state-sponsored contests for how fast you could do CW and so on. And the state, quote unquote, the city, whatever, would actually build and furnish a radio club. And now that they're no longer doing that, you know, the individual hams are struggling a bit, but they treated it as a sport. They treated other things as sports too. Radio was a sport. Trying to remember what else. They did some other funny things that we wouldn't necessarily consider sports. I know I talked with a Russian guy who had come from Central Asia to the U.S., and his big thing in life was the accordion. They treat accordion competitions the way we would treat piano competitions. And so he was just playing popular songs in this restaurant, and I says, play me something seriously Russian. And he did, and it was fabulous. Really good. Had a hail the size of large chickpeas. Came down hard, but only lasted 10 minutes. I remember one time I was driving home from work, and it had hailed. And every tree was taken, or every leaf was taken off of every tree and splattered down on the roadway and turned the roadway green. That particular hailstorm cost the insurance companies over $100 million for damages. And with $100 million flowing into Denver, it really jump-started the economy, really helped out the economy there. So a little hail can do good things, I guess. Okay, let's see. Felipe Lewis says, John, ISS for SSTV frequency 145.8 megahertz with the PD120 mode. If you go into the, what is it, SSMMTY or something like that, software, there's lots of different modes. The software will auto-detect the mode if it can. So, okay, yeah, the name is David Casler with double I's. And I don't know why anyone would do that. I have the ability, if my content shows up on somebody else's channel, I can click and file a content claim on that. Don't know that I've ever done it. Is there a poor man's DX rig? Look at the 7300. The 7300 is a very nice radio. If you can afford a 7610, that really is ICOM's DX radio. You get a no-knobs SDR, it'll be an ANAN. Yeah, aren't the ANANs built in, tell me if I'm wrong, or in India? So I got two keys, a bencher, paddle, and one straight key, and an AEA auto keyer. Chinwags are fun. Cost testing is work. Yes, absolutely. Okay, chess. Yes, you had to be in a club in Russia to get your license, plus you had to build your own equipment. Yeah, and they did. And the parts were made available for them to do that. A lot of tube stuff. The Russian view of technology was not that new technology would replace old technology. It was that new technology would continue to supplement old technology. And so if they had something that worked and it used vacuum tubes, great. They'd keep using it. And did. And they made their vacuum tubes in Estonia. And I guess there were more made in Bulgaria. Chess, yes. Let's see. Yes, use MMSS TV software. Thank you. Those expensive radios are racing to climb to the top of Sherwin engineering rankings. How did those rankings get so popular? From what I understand about the Sherwood Engineering rankings is that they are pretty thorough. They do give you a benchmark. Well, one of the problems is, and the reason they talk about things like third order intercept and stuff like that, would have been irrelevant back in the days of the 75A4 and, the Drake year and stuff like that, because no radio did very well with those things and nobody cared. But as radios get better and better and better and better, they're trying to find finer and finer and finer measurements to say that this extremely expensive radio is one hair better than this other extremely expensive radio. So therefore you ought to buy it. And I don't know. I've got my 7300 here. Now I have the FTDX 3000 from Yaesu, which is a better radio than the 7300. And I love that radio, but when I came out with the idea of a reference station, I figured, okay, what's the best all-round radio for somebody just getting into HF that will last them quite a number of years and give them lots of satisfaction? And that is where I came up with the 7300. Okay. Are you in Colorado? I am. An Astron 50M power supply, MFJ manual tuner, MFJ antenna, and the Desk 2 power strips, yes. Thoughts on antenna placement on airplanes? Most beginner pilots can't tell what does what on an airplane. Well, they're not taught that. If you are even as a sport pilot, you're not told anything technical about the machine to speak of. I mean, you're taught about things like lift and drag and stalling and stuff like that. You're taught enough to pre-flight the airplane. But, really beyond that, you're not allowed to touch it. It has to be a approved FAA certified mechanic do the work on it. Now, my airplane is experimental, so I can do my own work because it's not an FAA certified airplane. Now, I do use the mechanics up there for things that are weird. For example, I had this problem where I brought this airplane that had lived its life in Arizona up to Colorado, and it experienced its first winter. And a lot of the tubes, talking fuel and air, and that was both pitot and static air, they just cracked. And I ended up having a rather large fuel spill in my hangar. And I took it down to the FBO and said, rip every inch of that tubing out of there and put in new. Every inch out. And they did that. It cost me a fortune, close to $2,000. But I wanted safe stuff in there. I did not want stuff that was going to crack on me in the cold, because it was, it's stuff that's years old, and it just had never been in a cold environment, and so it had never had that stretch it gets when the tube contracts and it's around a metal fitting that doesn't contract at the same rate. It'll split the tube, and that's what it was doing. So now the antenna for your normal communications with the tower and stuff like that are in the 120-ish megahertz range. And so you get an antenna a little bit longer than a 2-meter antenna, and it sticks out the bottom of the airplane. Now, other little things are much smaller. The GPS antennas are just little flat packs that sit up on the dashboard. I've got 2 of them sitting on the dashboard right now. What is the highest altitude you have flown so far? 11,500 feet, coming back from Arizona. A sport plane is not supposed to go above 10,000 feet, or 2,000 feet above terrain, whichever is higher. In California, at 10,000 feet, you're going to fly into the side of a mountain. Now, the highest I have ever been on Earth is 13,000 feet, and that's right down here at Imogene Pass. And I did that on my motorcycle, and the motorcycle is only 250cc. I actually had to kind of push along with it at 13,000 feet to keep that thing going, because there's no air up there. Let's see. Oh, David Fuller says his sister's doing super better off the ventilator and talking. Oh, very good, David. We're very happy for you. Okay, highest altitude flown, supplemental oxygen needed in your part of Colorado. Not to fly, but for me. Like I said, I've had this ongoing issue with shortness of breath. And so I have handy right here that thing in case I need it. Some days I need it more than other days. So, the doctor listened to my lungs today and he couldn't hear much in the lower right. So he sent me over to the hospital to get an x-ray. I don't know what'll come back. We'll see. I picked up an SX-111 and an HT-37. I think those are helicopters. It may be boring to many, but any experience with them previously, just a short comment, is cool. Get a magazine called Electric Radio. That's the name of the magazine, Electric Radio. And we'll look here on the screen and we'll go to ermag.com. And here is Electric Radio Magazine. Okay? This is the thing you want to subscribe to. All right? Because Electric Radio Magazine is all about old tube type radios. Okay? Transmitters, receivers, power supplies, everything like that. So, and it's showing up here, some of those. And you'll find a wealth of information in there. Plus, it happens to be my favorite radio magazine. Just to, I don't know, makes me feel younger to go back to the old days. Okay. Supplemental oxygen. There's some sort of a rule. If you're above 12,000 feet, your passengers have to have oxygen. Fortunately, my little thing here is FAA approved. But let's see. Soviet model of electronics manufacturing was intended for longevity versus the United States model of planned obsolescence. Yes. 50 amp equals 50 amps, and M the meter. Okay. Thanks for your work. Thank you, KI5MID. 10,000 feet elevation, even in summer, can get pretty cold. Yes, it can. You get above 10,000 feet in Colorado, and it can snow any day of the year. And I've seen it snow in June atop Independence Pass. Let's see, same issues with coax? Yeah, you do. Getting ready to work the gray line here. Good. I did a video on that. I don't know if that video's come out yet. I did a video on the gray line. VLF antennas that they drag behind planes to communicate with nuclear subs. Oh, those were in use back in the 50s. And they actually had to fly them. There was a aerodynamic sort of a winglet at the back of them, of these long wires, so that they could fly the thing so it wouldn't flap all over everywhere. They could be seriously long. William Myers, KE0OG, has added $20 to the chat revenue. It says, thanks, Steve. Any recommendations for a 160-meter antenna? Just curious. Where have I got that? Oh, shoot. Well, There is an ARRL book about 160 meter antennas. The problem with 160 meter antenna is that a full height is 160 meters. I'm sorry, 80 meters. 80 meters high. 200 and some odd feet, 240 feet, plus whatever the metric conversion is there. Okay, it's very high. It's a broadcast tower size height, a little smaller than that. And then you need the radio field. Now, what people will do to make a 160 meter antenna is that they'll base load it. So they'll put a coil at the bottom. That allows you to make a much shorter vertical. But whenever you load an antenna with a lot of reactance, it will cause the Q to go up, which means that the bandwidth of the antenna goes down. So instead of picking up the entire 180 meter band, you may only get 25 kilohertz of it. Now, the other thing you can do at the top of the antenna is to top load it with radials sticking out up there, and those add capacitance to the antenna, which is another way of electrically shortening the antenna. It's actually the part in the middle that radiates, not the capacitor, not the inductor, but the resistive part in the middle that radiates. Can you make a dipole for it? Now, what I would do, one thing you can do is 160 meter full wavelength horizontal loop. If you can get it up about 30 feet, I know that's a lot of wire, make a loop, and or sort of loopish. The idea is to get, the ideal loop antenna is the circle, but if you have to bang in the edges a little bit just to get it somewhere, you can do it. I had an 80 meter full wavelength loop at one point. I mean, it does work. It's not the world's best antenna. And because the antenna is so close to the ground, you're going to get pretty high angles of radiation. So you're going to get NVIS type of radiation, but you can look at that. Feed it with ladder line, and you're going to end up having to have a balun somewhere. Check the impedances and things like that in picking that balun, because the impedances are going to be weird. Now, that antenna, if it's a full wavelength horizontal loop, will also work on higher frequencies, but it will have really weird radiation patterns at like 20 meters or something like that. But they do work. People do work 160, but that's how they do it, is by loading the antenna like crazy. Like, for example, let's suppose you have a tower, 35-foot tower. Okay, it's way too short for 160 meters. But you can build around the bottom of it a loading coil and then come up, 15, 16 feet and tap into it there. And you can actually load the thing on 160 meters. It can be done. So look into aopa.org for insurance advice. That's where I got this insurance. Thanks for the support. When will the semiconductor shortage end? I'm jonesing for a 7300. It will end little by little. It will end behind the scenes. The problem is that semiconductor plants are not general purpose manufacturing facilities. The lines in the semiconductor fabs or fabrication plant are designed for specific chips. And you can't just flip a switch to another, because everything about the fab is specific to that chip. And these chips have multiple layers, layers upon layers upon layers. So they have to be exposed to light or laser very frequently to get the next layer, and then built layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. And so obviously all that equipment has to be dedicated to one type of chip. And so we're going to see the fab that makes the little chips for the KE0OGs for the Ford vehicles will come back online when it comes back online. So that shortage will go away. Then other shortages will go away, and so on. It's going to happen gradually, and I think it's going to take a while. The reason it's going to take a while is the financial issues associated with the chip shortages. Fabs are highly automated facilities that are terribly, terribly dependent upon highly trained people. And if you lose a critical mass of the people, you will, quote, lose the process. And I've seen that happen many years ago, where a facility that, well, it was one of the company I was working with, lost the process. And all the work you've got to go through to get the process back. Because you got to, this chip didn't work. Well, what part of the chip didn't work? Where was that part made in the process? Okay, let's go through that and see what exactly is happening. And you got to slow this thing to a crawl while you figure out what to do. Okay. So William Myers, I think I answered your question about, there is a book by the League on short, manageable 160 meter antennas. Okay, William Myers, yeah, full wave loop. Father, a master sergeant in the USAF, told stories of approach fences at airports with wire antennas and lead weights tangled therein in the 1950s. Yeah, if you couldn't get that wire reeled back in, I mean, it doesn't take much to kink a wire up there. And that wire, in order to be 2 miles long, which is about what it was, has to be a pretty hefty wire. And the equipment to wind that wire back in would have to be kind of forward in the aircraft close to the wings, because as you push that wire out, it's going to completely change the weight and balance of the aircraft by hundreds of pounds. So that was a non-trivial achievement. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure about the height. Let's see. R.G. Wolf says, thanks for everything, Sensei. I think making sense is what he's saying. Another aspect of radio interference, the Altair 8800 computer back in the 70s, was used by computer hobbyists by placing a nearby radio to play music from the computer interference. Yes, there were actually software that you could do that would do that. The problem with the early TTL was the squareness of the square waves. They were remarkably square, as square as they could make them. And a square wave is made up of the fundamental plus all the odd harmonics all the way up to infinity. And you've got to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, 20 of these for the wave to start to look square. And so it would get way up. It would interfere with everything. And now computers are shielded and all that sort of thing. A fun little story. I once worked with the fellow who designed the cabling for the monitor and the keyboard of the very first IBM PC, the A model. And he said they had a terrible time getting it down below FCC limits for missions. And they just kept cutting the wire shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, if you remember those computers, you remember that the wire between the keyboard and the computer, and between the computer and the monitors were only about this long. Only about that long. And that's because if they were any longer, the emissions would be too high. Okay. Yeah. So check that antenna out. Love the channel. Find it interesting. Okay. Love the weekly chats. Oscar Hotel 8 Sierra Tango November has a recent video that looks like a winner. Good for him. The drought in Taiwan means the chip fabs are limited by the amount of water they can access, and they take enormous amounts. And it's got to be very pure. And they need very pure sand, and and so on. I want an end-fed antenna that is also good for shortwave listening. Fairly big yard, but don't want an erect mast. The thing about shortwave antennas, for shortwave listening, for broadcasts and stuff, is you don't want a high Q antenna, because then it will only be over a limited range. So you don't want a dipole or something like that. The best thing to do is just take a long wire and throw it out back. Get it up, in the tree or something like that. And that will work quite well for you. If you want, you can also, if you've got an old capacitor, variable capacitor, 100 PF or something like that, put that in series with the wire, and you can kind of trim the antenna to whatever band you're listening to. Also, there is now a Chinese-made. That's what this little thing goes to. MLA 30 plus. MLA 30 plus. This is something that will, you can use this as a shortwave antenna. They're not very expensive. I was surprised how inexpensive they are, and I was also surprised how well it worked. I bought one using channel funds and did a review on it fairly recently. So that way, with that broadband antenna with an amplifier, you can pick up some pretty good things. Have you noticed that there's a company called Elon? I think it's Elon. They are advertising in QST. Here it is. Eaton. Okay. And for whatever reason, they're using actually thicker paper than the cover of the magazine to do their ads on. And they've been in QST for the last several months. MFJ has picked them up as a source, so you can get them through MFJ. Okay. Can't old chips be recycled? Not really. They can be reused. And there's a big black market in computer chips that have been taken from old computers and repackaged and resold as new. May have to go back to core memory. Core memory was such a pain, and you couldn't make it very big. So, my first HF antenna was a 100-foot speaker wire. Yep. Doesn't using differential signaling drastically reduce EMI? Yes, it does. It does. However, RS-232, it does differential signaling around the ground. So instead of two wires swapping voltages, which would be balanced, you've got a ground, and then this frequency swaps around ground, like that, like an RS-232. Okay, so the early computer communications were done with unbalanced wiring. Whereas the early telecommunications, after they got over their initial problems, was done with balanced wires, where they would swap voltages like this. And then that way they were balanced and they would not emit so much as the others. Okay. Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Core memory is still being used in certain applications, yes. OH8 STN's antenna video of the Skyloop is technically only up to 80 meters, but it gives you an idea what you can do if you have the room for 160. Just double the length. Yeah, the MLA 30 Plus. Okay. Elon is a sub of the China company Texan. Yeah, they have such an intricate interweaving of names and so on. So you can use a variable capacitor to tune my random wire antenna. Yeah. What you might try is the MFJ makes the MFJ 901B. There it is. This, by the way, was my very first MFJ product. It is an MFJ 901B. And it's an antenna tuner, classic T antenna tuner. Okay. And it has an inductor, which is switched. So it's not optimal that way. But it's got capacitors here. What you can do with this is from the back where it says transmitter, that hooks to your radio, your receiver. And then down here, this one right here says wire. That you connect to your long wire. If you have a handy ground, you can connect that to it there, okay? And you don't connect this to anything. But this goes to your long wire. That goes to ground if you got one. And then you just tune the front for max noise. Now what you will tune first, put these up kind of in the middle of their range. These two on the outside. And then tune this. The lower the letter, the lower the band. So if you're A, you're down around 160 meters or so. Get up to D, you're around 40 meters. So you can just tune this for max noise and then tune these back and forth for max noise. And voila, you've got yourself a trimming device for your shortwave antenna. Now this used to cost 99 bucks. I think it's about 120 now. And it's a pretty solid device. Like I said, I've had it for many, many years. I don't need it now because I tend to run resonant antennas, and the antenna tuner in the 7300 takes care of the rest. So I don't need an outboard tuner. I do have another outboard tuner, which is a MFJ 993B, which is a balanced, well, let's see, they all have balanced. You can do balanced output with this too. But it's automatic. And I used to use it a lot with the Ten-Tec, which did not have an antenna tuner. And then once I got the FT DX3000, that has a built-in tuner. Okay. Does anybody know a good rig or kit for 2-meter Single sideband FM radio too expensive for VK land. My AC-187 is dead. Don't mind QRP, but FM rig not needed. Well, you're not going to find one that's built just for VHF. That does not include FM. Yaesu makes several radios. They're so-called DC Light, which you do HF, VHF, UHF. And some of them are not very expensive. That's relatively not expensive. But that's all I can suggest. I don't know of anything else that would work in that range. I think MFJ at one point had a 6-meter sideband rig. I don't know. That was a long time ago. If you want a 160-meter antenna, try a 16-meter magnetic loop, which is 1/10 of the wavelength. Yes, that will work too. And even though that's extremely high Q, one of the things you have to run into, or that you run into with these magnetic antennas at very low frequencies, is that they are so narrowband that they can't handle a single sideband signal. So you can do CW and stuff like that with them. Okay. Denny Kelbaugh sends $5 to Channel Funds. Says, thanks for all the great info, Dave. Thank you very much. I might have 160 meters of barbed wire on a dielectric fence, but I don't think it is high enough to be very useful. You might be surprised. If you can make sure you've turned off the electric fence, try that as a loop and see what you hear. First, try putting in just one end and then both, and see what you have out there. You say, but it's only 3 feet off the ground. I am thinking that if you're in an area that's at all arid, dry, you may have an effective ground that's quite a bit deeper because of the dry soil. Rock is not a good conductor of electricity. A soil with some water in it can be a better conductor of electricity. But you'd be surprised what you can do. After all, a beverage antenna, if you're just listening, is a piece of wire that's as long as you can make it, held up about 8 feet so people don't guillotine themselves when they come in contact with it. That's called a beverage antenna. It's for receive only. But they're pretty low to the ground. Okay, let's see. Dave has several long videos in balance. Yes, I do. Can I please go over the field day bonus points? Go through the rules. Let's go to, let's see, screen. We've got time here. Let's go to ARRL. Field day rules. Okay, so this is arrl.org/field-day-rules. Okay, and it's got the different categories of stations and so on. Now we get down to the exchange, miscellaneous rules, scoring, QSO points, power multipliers, bonus points. All stations are different. Okay, they are 100% emergency power, which most will do. Okay, media publicity, meaning getting some article published. Well, you just have to submit the release. It doesn't actually have to result in an article. It has to be in a public location where the public will see it, like in a shopping park center, park, school, campus, etc. The intent is for amateur radio to be on display for the public. A public information table, message origination to the station manager, message handling, satellite QSO, alternate power, like we use, the club owns a big solar panel. Copying the WA1W bulletin, educational activity. I did one year when I taught about fox hunting. If you can get an elected government official to come and visit, and see what you're doing there, that's good. A site visitation by representation of an agency, and it lists the agencies: Red Cross, Salvation Army, local emergency management, which could be called a variety of things, law enforcement, etc., as a result of the invitation. And the go-to bonus, and you get a 50-point bonus for web submission, 20-point bonus for youth social media, safety officer bonus. Okay, so there are your extra points. So just go read those. There's usually somebody in your club who is like super up on this and is super looking at what the club needs to do in order to have these. Some of these, for example, you will need to submit a photograph with your application. Others you don't need to. You can just assert that you have done it. Dentron Super Tuner. Boy, I haven't heard one of those in a long time. Do you remember current loop maxed out to 19.2 kilobits per second? It's great for distance runs. Huh. Not so sure. That sounds like a modem rate. H2 by like an FT60 or something bigger. That's a VHF only radio. Okay, so I went over the field day bonus points. Infed half wave, which contrary to popular belief is a dipole. The dipole refers to the length of the antenna, not how it's fed. 160 meter wire antenna is a cheap experiment, yes. The loop would be nice. Maximilian Noise was a great radio operator and had great tuning method. So when we properly tune, oh yes, they say it's tuned for max noise. Yes, very good, very good. Okay, listening as you adjust the liner when you hear the static and sound get louder. Be careful of the AGC, because as it gets louder, the AGC could be cutting it back. So, wiggle it back and forth. Ray Nelson, Solder left MPD Digital. It was his family company. I don't know anything about that. I've heard that before, but I've not been in contact with him. Okay. Yeah, fence antenna is about 3 or 4 feet off the ground. Yes, beverage. Okay. I do that as noise floor is fairly constant signal. That's easy to hear. Yes and no. There is a noise floor on HF. And radios don't have to work very hard to hear down to the noise floor, even at S0. Now, when you get up at VHF and stuff, you want, well, just get up in the higher HF bands, 15 meters, 10 meters, 12 meters. The noise floor is actually low enough that you won't hear anything when you turn on your radio. It's below that of what the radio can do. Now, the thing about down near the ground, the beverage antenna picks up less noise. It'll pick up the same signal, but less noise. It's actually a lousy receive antenna, but it's even lousier at receiving noise. So if you amplify it enough, you can get a signal you wouldn't otherwise get. G5RV. Good deal. Is living in the center of the U.S. that much of a handicap to making DX contacts? I live in South Dakota. Yes, we are farther from the Europe and farther from Asia here. I found it to be a problem. Hackaday has an article up about a Pi Hat SDR transceiver project that looks cool. It would be pretty low power. Oceans and seas have better conductivity than the good ground we have in North and South Dakota. Yeah. Okay. I'm in PNW and have good range all over the Pacific. Used to talk about and possibly use earth batteries back in the 1800s in conjunction with the telegraph. Talked about different trees and soil creating different amounts of electrical value. Yes, they do. You can, take an onion or something and stick two wires and then you'll get a non-zero voltage. It's the acid in the vegetable or whatever that does it. Ernest G. Wilson II sent $5. Thanks for going over the field day bonus points. Just learning how to work the Super Chat 73 from W3GUY, Ernie in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much. Let's see. In most of the telegraphy history through the 1800s, the batteries were lead acid batteries, and the batteries had to be cleaned and maintained, and that was one of the nasty things the operator had to do, was battery maintenance. Better batteries that were sealed and rechargeable. The way the batteries were recharged, as you discharge a battery, you get lead sulfate on the shield. So there's one way you can get that lead sulfate off. So recharge the battery, or take the plate out and scrub it off. Which would you rather do? But it just talks a little bit about interesting things they did. Why does the FCC have so many laws regarding this device must receive interference, must not cause interference to others? That is your standard FCC Part 15 label. And what they are trying to do there is to say, if your device and his device interfere with each other, you two figure it out, because we're not going to get involved. It's kind of what that says. So, yeah, I know even the 7300 manual has that statement in there. Let's see. Just got China confirmed on Logbook of the World using a G5RV. Well, congratulations, Charlie. Very good for you. Like this video if you don't want high SWR. Dave will get 100K within 2 weeks. No, I won't. I'm getting new subscribers at the rate of about 1,400 a month. I was hoping that being in QST might get me more subscribers, but so far that hasn't happened. We're just in the beginning, early phases of that relationship. So, which reminds me, I need to turn in the September column by June 30th, so I better get to writing. Okay, I'm working on my Work All States Award. I can't get Hawaii and Alaska. Can you give me any pointers on how to get those two? Okay, they're DX, they're a long ways away, so your higher frequencies are going to happen. You might be able to get Alaska on Gray Line at certain times of the year. You won't get Hawaii that way. There is a net on 40 meters. It's a Worked All States spotter net. People will come into the net and they will have a state in mind. And when it gets to their turn, they can call CQ North Dakota, CQ North Dakota. And if somebody is on from North Dakota on that net, the two of them can talk to each other, make an official contact, and there, you've got North Dakota. You do the same thing with Hawaii, Alaska, and so on. Now, I don't know where that Worked All States net is. You can probably Google that and see what you can find for that. I know there are some that are traditionally hard to get, like Vermont and Vermont, Connecticut, South and North Dakota are hard to get. California is like super easy. I'm here in, I'm trying to get worked all states on Logbook of the World, and I'm missing like 1 or 2 states. Europe was booming in here. Yes, they had glass batteries. Optical Man Jeff is calling me a national treasure. I don't know that I'm worth my weight in gold. Thank you very much, though, Jeff. I appreciate that. Good job, William Myers. You got the numbers up. MFJ still has a 6-meter SSB transceiver, runs around 350. Sean, thank you for confirming my sketchy recollection there. Okay, guy in Washington. Okay. We've got 5 minutes. Let's do one question. I can find it here. Mostly the Ask Dave questions. Mostly the Ask Dave questions are finding their way into videos. Let's see, I can't get this down anymore. I'm Elmering a new ham and was wondering if you know of any articles that explaining how far each of the different modes travel versus one and another. So far, I've only seen one article from the 2013 edition of QSD. Thanks for your videos. They're great. You know, that's an interesting one I might make a video about. Curtis LeMay was the commander-in-chief of the Strategic Air Command, and he happened to be personal friends with Art Collins, who was the leader of Collins Radio. And they were looking at the problem of how to communicate with the U.S. to the bombers that were being sent over the North Pole to carry out a bombing operation on the Russians. They knew that CW worked well, but a lot of airmen didn't know CW and couldn't do it at the rates required. So they looked at AM, because those were basically the two technologies they had available at the time. And they decided that single sideband was about 8 times the range of AM. So they went with single sideband. And that Art Collins' company did not pioneer single sideband. It was aware of the technique. The technique was actually invented by Bell Labs. But they put equipment together to do that. The company that really dug into single sideband was Central Electronics, Art Shum. But anyway, it was the Collins LeMay thing that really pushed single sideband. Now, what is the mode today that will go the furthest? Okay, setting aside moon bounce would be FT8. FT8 is made as a low power mode. It's in order for it to go those distances, it's extremely restricted in what it can do. And send call signs, signal reports, and grid squares, and that's it. You can, now there is something called JS8 call, which uses techniques similar to that for a somewhat more conversational mode, which I haven't tried yet. Everybody's been telling me I need to try it. I guess I need to try it. But JT8 will go the furthest. It has to do with 2 things. First, signal strength. The signal strength has to be enough that it can be received by the far station. And then second, the protocols and coding. For example, JT8 is sent with a boatload of bits, not priority, parity bits. is sent with a boatload of parity bits. More parity bits than there are data bits. And they're sent with an algorithm to where, and this is called forward error correction. The receiver can look at what it has received and can say, okay, there was an error in the message. Let me look at all these parity bits and see if I can figure out what the error must have been. And it's extremely successful at doing that. The first amateur radio mode that used the parity bits was, to any degree, was Amtor, which was my first introduction to digital modes. It's just an amateurization of Cytor, which was a technique used by ship to shore. And it worked very well. It was slow, hard on the radio, but worked very well. And then came along Pactor. Pactor had a longer packet, and then it had not only automatic repeat request, or automatic repeat ARQ. It also had forward error correction. So it could take what it had received and could tell if the packet was bad, could try to fix it. If it couldn't fix it, it would just send back a knack, not acknowledged. Okay, and then the original station would send it again, and you do the same thing. The third time that it was sent, the system would use all three of the sent packets and mush them together in an algorithm to pull out the original packet. So it was part redundancy, part parity code, part ARQ, lots of things like that. It's a whole history of what was done. It's very interesting. I should do a video on it. I think I just did. Anyway, we are beyond time here. So let me find the right. There we go. Okay. Oh yeah, Olivia is another one. Some of the others. 15 meters. Okay. All right. Let's see, MFJ 350 is dollars, about 600 Australian. Oh my goodness. You know, I had somebody asking for the extra class videos from Italy. Apparently the European license exams are not terribly different from the American extra class license exam. And quite a few people have told me that my licensing videos are very helpful to them abroad. And it only cost me $1 more. Normally it cost me about $3, $3.20, $3.25 to send one of those stateside, but it's only like $4, certainly less than $5, to send it to Europe. But to send it some other places, whoo, sending it to Canada is also expensive. But anywhere. Okay, so thank you all very much. The center pin and then having it slanted because of a metal mast. Oh, I'll have to take a look at that. Does that mean any protocol that doesn't use that route of corrections is feckless? Nice. Yeah, I guess so. Let's see. Pointers to how to get better receive and transmit. There are quite a few going on and on. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to have to say 73. I apologize. I told my wife she could have the internet back at 8:15. That's the one day a week I say to my wife, you can't use the internet because I'm using it for the live stream. So she likes to watch TV on Netflix and Prime and stuff like that. So I want to say very much to all of you, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for sending me topics to do videos about. Thank you for how you respond by supporting the channel funds and all of those things like that. It makes amateur radio a lot of fun. And I think this additional dimension with the league is just going to add more to the interest. It will not affect our normal channel communications. I'll still be putting out a video a day. They will be hosting the videos that will be on their end, so rather than on mine. So a vertical 40 using SO239 chassis and 40-foot radials and is slanted on a metal mast. No, it's not. That's fine. Okay, so thank you all very much. Thank you to other YouTubers for stopping by and saying hi. And we'll talk to you all soon. So until we next meet, 73.